From the moment Caitlin was born, her mother and father, Shauna and Tim, knew that something was wrong. Right away, we were going to a larger hospital for a transfusion, remembers Tim. And we'd been through 2 relatively easy births before this, with our other children. We knew it wasn't good. Caitlin was born with a tumor on her liver, explained Shauna. There were so many surgeries and procedures, one in which they even had to start her heart again. She barely survived. We almost lost her, agrees Tim. Many times I would come to the hospital to see her, and she would just light up with the biggest smile I've ever seen. She was my inspiration, but after a while, she wouldn't smile. That's how I knew that she was getting desperately sick. Little Caitlin was put on the waiting list for a liver at the age of 5 months. And just 2 days later, they got the call. A young man, Jeff, had died in a tragic fall, and he was a match for Caitlin. It's a terrible moment, says Tim. At one time, you're thrilled that your child is going to live, and at the same time, you know that some other family is going through the worst moment in their lives. Caitlin received a partial liver transplant from Jeff, and the healing began. Donating organs is a very important decision that I believe everyone should consider. I would like to discuss with you today why it is important to become an organ donor, the myths of becoming an organ donor, and who can become an organ donor and how. So, why become an organ donor? It's simple, really. One donor can save up to 7 lives with their organs and can improve 50 lives from their tissues. That's enough for me personally to want to donate, and I do. Someday. So, first of all, what can be transplanted? Organs like your heart, your liver, your lungs, your pancreas, and intestine can all be transplanted. Now, more than 16,000 patients are currently awaiting a liver transplant. My best friend's father was one of those people, but unfortunately there are too many waiting and not enough donating. Now, an interesting fact about liver transplants is that you can take one from an adult and actually split it, and it can be transplanted into 2 people. Tissues can also be transplanted. Your corneas, bone, heart valves, skin, and blood vessels. When I found that skin could be transplanted, my first thought was, gross, someone else's skin. But then I thought, transplanted for what though? Now, it can be used for those suffering from burns, trauma, and some other things. It's used to protect from infection and stimulate healing. Well, which is not gross at all, but I think it's kind of amazing. Now, it is so important for victims who have suffered illness or injury to be able to receive a transplant from a donor. So, who can receive organ donations? Anyone at any age, from 1 to 100. Approximately 23,000 organ recipients receive transplants from the deceased. But still, unfortunately, 121,272 people are still waiting for an organ, and there are only 14,257 donors. 18 people will die each day waiting for an organ. And these transplants do work. In 2012, the percentage was noted for the recipients who were still living 5 years after the transplant. 83% of kidney transplants, 76.8% of heart, 74.3% of liver, and 55.2% of lung. An organ could be the best gift you ever give someone, even in your death. Now, who knows if you or a loved one could be on the waiting list someday. But there are a few things that some people believe and that may make them not want to donate. Here are the 4 main myths that many people believe to be true. Now, myth number 1. It's expensive for the donor or their family for the donation. When in reality, there is no cost to either. Costs are actually covered by the transplant recipient on their insurance if they have it. Hopefully they do. The donor or their family and the insurance is only responsible for paying the medical care up to the point of death. Now, myth number 2. The hospital staff won't work as hard to save the donor's life. I think this one is the most irrational. Now, this is not the case at all. They focus on saving your life, not somebody else's. According to donorrecovery.org, someone must be declared brain dead. Now, that is when they are clinically and legally dead. This is not the same thing as being in a coma or a vegetative state, in case you were wondering. Now, protocol to being declared brain dead is the same whether the person is an organ donor or not. So they treat everyone the same. Okay, now myth number 3. You cannot have an open casket funeral if you are an organ donor. Now, once again, this is completely not true. Now, the body is treated with care during the donation process. It's treated with care regardless. And the body is clothed for burial, so there are no visible signs of organ donation. According to mayoclinic.org, if it's a bone donation, a rod will be inserted where the bone was removed, and with a skin donation, a thin layer is removed from your back, so nobody even notices. Now, lastly, myth number 4. The donor has to be in great health, and the donor needs to be an adult. Now, neither of these are correct, but anyone regardless of age or medical history can be an organ donor. As long as the parent or guardian consents, even a small child can be an organ donor. This brings me to my next and final point. Who exactly can become an organ donor, and how? As I've said before, anyone can be an organ donor. You may have some medical issues, but your organs could still be able to be used. There are a few medical conditions that may disqualify you from being a donor. If you have diabetes, heart issues, rapidly spreading cancers, the professionals will do an assessment at the time of your death to determine if these are suitable. But many times it turns out that some organs aren't usable. According to WebMD.com, HIV, certain forms of cancer, and severe infection are the few that do exclude donation. So how can you become an organ donor? It's easy. In an article on USA Today, polls show that more than 90% of people, they say that being an organ donor is the right thing to do, but only 45% of adults are actually registered as a donor. 45%. Why is this? It should be 100. You're not going to miss them when you're going. Now, some of the reasoning behind this, and I believe a lot of it, is for fear. Fear of those myths that I just busted above. And the other reason, I believe, is procrastination. But please, I cannot stress this enough, do not wait. Check out organdonor.gov to register. Or register the next time you visit the DMV. You can even specify which organs you are willing to donate. Now, going back to Caitlin's story, the little girl that needed a transplant, they were able to connect with Jeff, the donor's family. Jeff's family had told them that Caitlin was the only thing that made sense out of their son's death. Today, Caitlin is 6 years old and in first grade. Her family can't imagine life without their miracle baby. She loves to sing and dance and is an active, loving child. She's so grateful, says Shauna. She's always happy, adds her father. The family keeps a picture of Jeff in Caitlin's room, along with a candle in the window. When asked, Caitlin simply says, "This is Jeff. He saved my life." Donating one's organs after death is an important decision that all should consider. You have the opportunity to be a good match for someone needing a transplant, and you can save a life.